Welcome back to Map Review. Now I haven't done one of these in a while, so I figured that I should take a look at DM Gump, seeing how it's one of the newer maps in Open Fortress's Deathmatch mode. And ever since it got added, I've always wanted to share my thoughts on it. Gump is an interesting map that stands out for a few reasons. I mean, just look at it. This particular shade of red used is great as a complement to the whites and blues that you see throughout the rest of the map. And it's packed to the brim with detail, all of which helps to create a look that is unique among Team Fortress 2 maps, let alone a source mod. Okay, so how else does Gump surprise? For one, the theme lends itself to offer more flexibility for gameplay. Now what do I mean by that exactly? Well, Open Fortress takes place in the TF2 universe, and while that game's world is greatly exaggerated compared to ours, everything taking place in TF2 is still grounded in a reality that is comparable to our own. In the case of Deathmatch, this results in the need to strike a tough balance, as the mod's inspiration was always more concerned with gameplay above all else, often taking place within structures that, to put it lightly, make no sense. You could just put a fresh coat of TF2 paint over some Quake maps to call it a day, but generally I find it more interesting when a map is defined by its theme, in terms of gameplay. Skate is a great example, as that map has all sorts of ramps, heights, and jumps that go hand in hand with Deathmatch's focus on movement, all the while still looking like an actual place. Now, the entirety of Gump is an oil rig, which is prime material when it comes to having all sorts of movement be possible, as well as having a layout that is much more abstract for a Team Fortress map. This also allows for an emphasis on verticality to an extent that I've never really seen in a prior Deathmatch map. Not to say that other maps haven't attempted this sort of thing, both here and in Team Fortress, but in my opinion they were never able to fully deliver. I think that's because of how open-ended this map is, which allows for a certain degree of freedom in comparison, and the numerous jump paths scattered throughout make it so many areas of the map are still accessible, so it doesn't end up being frustrating. I guess all this makes the experience a little too extreme to be my absolute favorite, but not to the point where it's annoying or bland. Weapon spawns are solid, and I particularly enjoy this rocket launcher as well as this railgun spawn. Yes, there's a railgun here, and there's also a crit power-up across the way. Oh, and let's not forget the gib up top too. Or I can just call it a BFG, they're essentially the same thing. This may seem like much, but to my knowledge it all works out. The auto-hopping in this game makes it easier to dodge damage, so sightlines are less of an issue. The GAB has a longer spawn timer than the crit power-up, and speaking of crits, you have to make sure your shots count. Otherwise, oh look, I'm out already. I'm also really glad that there isn't a flamethrower here, not just because I hate using it, but also because Air Blast exists. Speaking of which, falling to your death in this map is surprisingly hard, as long as you're being careful. Continuing on the topic of hazards, I should probably talk about these barrels. Look, I was worried that these things would be used to get cheap kills just like those damn pumpkins in Scream Fortress. But they're actually somewhat tanky, needing a whole super shotgun blast to explode. Not even a single rocket is enough. And like those pumpkin bombs, you can give yourself a boost with them if you don't have an explosive weapon. For instance, if the rocket launcher that spawns in this area has already been looted, you can use the nearby barrel to get up top to this area. And as a side note, these just simply add to the environment. You see, it's the little things that tend to make a good map great. Honestly, I don't have much to complain about here aside from the railings, which may inhibit movement, but even then I never really had an issue with them. All in all, this layout is abstract but easy to follow, the constant height advantages make fights varied and interesting, and the lack of walls make it so map control is more of an essential skill, as everyone is practically exposed, save for the few interior segments. In fact, it seems that this map has already built somewhat of a cult following, akin to Hightower's place in the TF2 community. With that in mind, I give DM Gump an S, which stands for shrimp for those uninformed, because I just had to fit a Forrest Gump reference in there somewhere, considering the map name. Yeah.